Good morning. Merry Christmas. This is Timothy Lampley uh, coming to you as part of the Week 8 critical assignment presentation for the final critical assignment in the fall 2018 COM 510 course taught by Dr. Melissa Naomi Tingle. The following presentation outline is provided. First, we'll cover our introduction, and within that, we will clarify the statement of purpose and rationale for the pilot research, theoretical framework, research question. Next, we'll do a brief perusal of the literature review, followed by the methodology. Within the research methodology, we'll cover procedures, sample, test population, instrument, and data analysis. Okay. From there, we'll also cover the results and actually combine that with the discussion feature of the pilot research. Within the discussion, we'll cover limitations and delimitations, and then we'll move toward the conclusion and implications for further research. So let's go ahead and get started. The statement of purpose for this research study is to investigate the methods of communication that churches use to process new members into their fellowships. Okay, and the rationale for that is that church leaders find themselves within a conundrum. Okay, and the difficulty of that conundrum is that elders have a solemn responsibility to warmly welcome people who seek to live out their faith in the community of believers. Of course, there are also people that are seeking to enter the community of believers, but with pernicious motivations. That is to say, that they are predators on some level who seek to sow discord and strife within that same community. So the theoretical framework for this research project, being that it is a communication course, and that one of the prerequisites was to choose a communication theory, was the uncertainty reduction theory of the communication discipline that I chose. It was developed by Charles Berger and his colleagues. And in summary, a definition of uncertainty reduction theory, hereafter identified as URT, seeks to investigate and understand how two unfamiliar communicative agents seek to decrease that unease through the use of certain strategies designed to build rapport and acquaintanceship. And as familiarity increases, uncertainty decreases. So that is to say that generally, when there are unfamiliar people that encounter one another and yet to some degree have to engage one another, they feeling that uncertainty about one another due to that unfamiliarity, use various methods and strategies to gain information about the other. And as they gather that information, and as that information connects with the person and they start to build rapport, what is called in URT affiliation or affection increases. As they start to build rapport, hey, I'm from Detroit. Hey, I do that for a profession. And they start to have some connection with that other person, affection or affiliation rises. As that rises, uncertainty decreases, and also the need for additional information to build that rapport also decreases. Now, in the other circumstance or in the other scenario where uncertainty may increase, as uncertainty increases, so does the demand for more information to be acquired increase in the same purpose of building rapport or explaining or understanding the behavior of the other. Okay, those are called like explanatory uncertainty, for an example. Okay. So, again, in brief summary, as two communicative agents encounter one another, a certain level of uncertainty is not only inevitable, but is also useful because it does promote caution. Um, and in that sense, people that feel uncertainty but have to engage with the other person use various means and strategies to acquire information, to build rapport, to better understand and connect with the other person. And as that happens, affection or affiliation increases. As that increases, uncertainty decreases, and therefore the need for more information also subsides. Moreover, URT can offer church leadership some viable and potent recommendations to assuage their doubts without compromising their responsibilities. And that's the main issue here. Of course, within this premise, we're assuming that the church membership process is one of a more formal nature where that care and concern is heightened, or if you will, the uncertainty of that person or the prospective member may be heightened. Now, that's not to say that some level of care or concern doesn't exist in those fellowships that do not have a formal process or maybe has a very casual one. But the results of the study show that those church leaders that do have a a more formal process to their church membership tend to also have higher levels of uncertainty when encountering um, new but unfamiliar prospective members. Okay, so the research question, riddle me this, is what specific communication methods can church leaders utilize to reduce, uncertainty of potential membership candidates when engaging in the membership process? What specific communication methods can church leaders utilize to reduce uncertainty of potential membership candidates when engaging in the membership process? Okay, and of course, as based on the theoretical framework, the uncertainty reduction theory of communications is being used. So, in regards to the literature review, there's good news and there's better news. So, the good news is that in regard to the amount of studies for either uncertainty reduction theory or church membership, there are plenty. Those studies, segregated to themselves, are ubiquitous. Okay, uh, so various contexts of uncertainty reduction theory and using that and examining and discovering solutions for various scenarios abound. Also, there are plenty of research cases and studies regarding church membership. However, those studies that are legion in amount or number, that is to say, many, um, typically are involved or regard um, a more secular, if you will, aspect, treating a church as if it were an organization and using organizational principles and methods and theories to gather that information and perform research. So that's the good news. As far as both of those concerned, in a segregated manner and in different contexts, the studies are ubiquitous. Now, the better news is that the amount of studies that directly connect URT with church membership issues are very sparse. Now, why would you say, Mr. Lampley, that that's good news? Well, I say that's better news because it's an open field of research. It's an open opportunity for additional research which, in my humble opinion, should occur. And it also provides an opportunity to either generate or theory development. So either more development can be done in different facets of uncertainty reduction, or perhaps a new theory can be developed and cultivated, perhaps within the context of faith-based um, institutions and other applications. Very, very much better news. So let's move to methodology. So with methodology, let's first cover data collection. So the primary research method involved, as far as the main approach, was a qualitative approach to data gathering and analysis, qualitative as opposed to quantitative, uh, uses non-numerical means and methods of collecting and gathering data. Some might think that might be an easier approach as opposed to the use of numbers or numerical agents, such as quantitative forms of research. But I disagree. It actually takes quite a bit of focus, energy, and attention to gather that data, to code through it, manual anyway, and really sift and refine that information to extract in a very exegetical manner the information that's there. And of course, comparing that with the research question or any hypotheses that have been formulated. Okay, anyway, I digress. So the qualitative approach to data gathering and analysis was chosen. And the tools within that approach that I chose were intensive interviewing and documentary strategies. So, continuing data collection, there was the intensive interviewing that I chose, and I had two intensive interviews that were scheduled. Um, I wanted to actually have three, but I wasn't able, regretfully, to achieve that. The caveats of time and convenience, particularly around the holiday or Advent season, were very challenging. So I originally wanted to have an interview with a member of church leadership, a church member, and a prospective member that was going through a membership process. Regretfully, the last interview was not available, but I was successful in completing the church leadership intensive interview and the church member intensive interview. So separate interview guides were created for both, consisting of several semi-structured questions. So the questions were prepared beforehand with several probes that were available to accentuate or to further refine the responses that were given to me by the respondents for the questions that I had. Okay, and then of course, continuing further with data collection, we had the documentary research strategies. So I was very thankful to find out that the test population, which is Emmaus Reformed Baptist Church, located in Hemet, California, they have an extensive library of documentation. Not only that, it's very well maintained and very well maintained, upkept, very organized. And I was very thankful to have a plethora of documentation to go through. The first section that I divided the documents into were core documents, which would be their foundation documents, and then supporting documents. So core documents for Emmaus Reformed Baptist Church were their constitution, and since they're a confessional congregation, the London Baptist Confession of 1689. Supporting documents involved um, uh, policy and procedure, church membership specifically, and some of their other doctrinal documents, the Chicago Confessions in regards to biblical inerrancy and hermeneutics as well. Many of those documents were not, they weren't relative to the study. There were a few of those ancillary documents that I did feel were germane to the study, simply because the position of the Emmaus Reformed Baptist Church is to, being a Reformed church, uh, they believe in sola scriptura, which is to say um, that the Holy Bible is the highest authority as far as for faith and practice in the church, in as far as members are concerned, and as far as the government of the church itself. So, if the Bible, the Holy Bible, is the highest authority uh, in governing practice and faith with the officers and the members, I wanted to peruse some of those documents and see if there was anything that could help me to understand their membership processes, and indeed there were. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's move to data analysis methods. Okay, so I used the grounded theory method, and there was an extensive amount of manual coding that was available. I did look at some of the um, software options, but I wanted to actually do it manually so I could better understand the process. I kind of figured to do things manually first, and then as I, build proficiency with those things, then I can go ahead and use then I can use software that could help expedite the process. It's sort of like in the military when you're doing survival. In the Marine Corps, when they teach survival, they teach you how to actually start a fire manually. Twigs, the little bow, and wood, and they teach you to manually make the fire. Then once you've mastered that and you've learned that, then they bring out the flint. And of course, that's appropriate because if you're ever in a situation where you don't have flint and you don't know how to manually make a fire, well, that can spell trouble. So I kind of carry that philosophy with me that I try to do things manually first, and then after getting a certain level of proficiency with that I can move on to the other. Not that I think that I've actually achieved that, but that's my philosophy anyway. Okay, let's get back on track. So for coding, there's three main types of coding. There is open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. So open coding, and basically when you're doing any sort of coding, it starts there. Uh, Open coding is a process where you're actually working to um, exegetically extract the thoughts, the ideas, the ideologies. It's very similar, actually, to the rhetorical criticism, particularly the ideological method of rhetorical criticism, where you're looking through rhetoric and you're gaining and gleaning knowledge about the rhetors. Um, ideologies. It's very similar here. So you're gleaning, you're looking through the materials, you're looking through the data, and you're looking to gather and collect the thoughts and the viewpoints and any of the messages and symbology that's involved within the documents and the data that you've collected. Okay, axial coding is where one looks for the um, core concepts that are within the documents, the core coding, if you will. Okay, and then of course selective coding is where you refine everything down to the main coding concept, the one by which all the other core concepts in the axial coding are connected. One ring to rule them all, right? for our Lord of the Rings fans. So past that, there are the categories according to communication theory. So since the prerequisite was to connect this, and it is a communications study and a communications based course, we were to take this study and our research question or the topic of interest or curiosity or frustration and connect that with a communication theory, of which I chose URT, which is uncertainty reduction theory. So after doing the coding, I took those those coding results, and then I further refined them into uncertain reduction theory coding categories to further help me understand and to see if there are viable strategies and what viable communication strategies exist within URT that can help church leaders in their, reduce uncertainty in their membership processes. So I did provide an example here of some of the coding. So here's a coding example. Over here toward the left, you'll see a raw sample where I just went through the document and pulled out the information, pulled out the information using Earl Babby's example in chapter 13, where he goes and does a coding of Leviticus. I used that as a template to do some raw coding. And then I take that raw sample and I come over here toward the right and I start a more refined open coding process of the repeating concepts in context to church membership. And I start to group them, as you can see here. Okay. So also, I then take the axial coding, and of course that's core concepts in the study. You'll see those in blue. And I sifted through the groups of coding that I did there, and then picked the core concepts out. And then we'll move over toward the right and we'll see selective coding, where we find the central code to which all the other ones connect. And the central code for this particular research study was the membership requirements. Emmaus Reformed Baptist Church, which was the sample population for the study, they require that a prospective member make a credible profession of faith, that they've been baptized upon that credible profession of faith, that they're living in accordance with their profession of faith, and that they're in general agreement with church doctrine, have a willingness to be taught, and honestly and with honesty contact elders regarding any doctrinal differences or misunderstandings. Okay. So let's go ahead and move toward the last section here, which is the results, discussion, and conclusion. So the major findings of the study, the following results were found. One, that effective and specific communication strategies exist for church leaders. Two, the more formal the system, the more benefit they can receive from URT strategies. That is to say that church leadership that use a more formal manner or system of bringing new members into their churches stand to benefit more from uncertainty reduction theory communication strategies than a church that certainly could benefit, but they would benefit more than one that had no membership process or a very lax in comparison, or informal, if you will, membership process. Okay. Incorporating URT strategies assists church leaders with walking that welcoming/warding tightrope. Okay. Being able to walk the tightrope and make sure that, one, they're not allowing predators into their fellowships, and while at the same time making sure that they're not rejecting people with a credible profession of faith that really genuinely seek to live out their faith in a community of believers. Okay. So there are some limitations to the study, and those need to be soberly and honestly brought out for the sake of ethically performing the study. So the first limitation to the study is that there was only one church used within the sampling. It would have been more, I think it would have been more helpful, and I think the results would have yielded some more conclusions, useful conclusions, if there would have been several churches that are involved, or even interdenominational or different denominational aspects and varying degrees of church membership. I think that would have really been helpful. The second thing is that only the leader and the current member were interviewed, as I stated before. It would have been helpful to have an interview where a prospective church member that is going through the process and interviewing them to find out their level of anxiety or uncertainty as well, and what they were doing and going through that terrible, all these ums. But that would have been extremely, extremely helpful. The last point is that only the qualitative research approach was used. Using the quantitative, or using some quantitative research method strategies such as polling and surveys would have also been helpful. Even phone interviews would have been helpful in extracting more data and information to investigate and look at. Okay, so let's move to the conclusion. So bottom line, the takeaways are: uncertainty is inevitable and natural when meeting the unfamiliar. Uncertainty is useful to promote caution. Now, that's very helpful if you have a church that practices a formal system or method of bringing new members into the church. So caution would be something that is welcomed. Not now, you can't stay in that realm, I guess, but or I surmise, but you could certainly use that as a tool to be watchful and discerning. Okay. The next point is that URT strategies can actually help church leaders decrease uncertainty. And then, of course, to quote the church leader that I had the opportunity to do an intensive interview with, he says that uncertainty, quote, never goes away altogether, unquote. Very, very helpful, very, very thoughtful. Uncertainty never goes away altogether, and that church leadership need to learn how to deal and live and accept a certain amount of uncertainty. Okay, so that is my presentation. I really, really, really enjoyed this project. It was certainly challenging, but very rewarding. Really enjoyed it. Here are some of the resources that I use, particularly within the presentation. Again, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for your instruction. Really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to taking more classes. Merry Christmas.